Jody will take it away.
All right. What's today? I don't even know. Monday. Happy Monday. Okay. We are in the final stretch, gentlemen. Welcome. We are very excited for the debate tonight. I want to lay out the ground rules for everyone so you know what to expect. This evening, there will be two sections of questions. We have a domestic policy section, which will be Act 1, and Act 2 will be international policy, foreign policy. Tonight, the format will begin 2 minutes opening statements. Each respondent, or I will ask a question to Mr. Swad first, and then you'll get the odds, you'll get the even questions. They will each have 90 seconds to respond to each question. The questions have been written in a way to inspire debate, because we want to understand the difference between each candidate's point of view. And so crowd participation is encouraged. After 90 seconds, then they will have 30 seconds for rebuttals before we move on to the next question. We will conclude with 2-minute closing statements. And gentlemen, are y'all ready to begin? All right, here we go. We'll begin with domestic policy. The White House Correspondents' Dinner. What?
May I?
Yes.
Before we begin.
Yeah, please go ahead and use your mic.
Opening statements.
Opening.
Okay.
Oh my God! I completely forgot opening statements. You guys, I'm so glad you stopped me.
No, this is not about that. This is not my opening statement. However, I would like to ask that since there's just two of us here tonight, and a pretty intimate crowd, that we suspend the use of the clock, at least suspend it so it's not a hard limit. I want Mr. Webb to have every opportunity to have a fully developed answer, and some of the questions you're going to ask are complex. They need to be framed in the proper context. If there's just two people here, we have plenty of time. I would like for you to go easy on Mr. Webb when it comes to the clock. And if you see fit, maybe afford me the same consideration. I would appreciate that. I just wanted to say that before we...
Well, I very much appreciate your plug there, but we have a lot of questions. So we will be adhering to the time clock.
I'm in there pitching, man. I'm trying to pitch.
But thank goodness you stopped me. Mr. Swad, we'll let you go first for a 2-minute opening statement.
Okay,
and Susan will be doing the time clock. She has 3 cards, green, yellow, red. It's like a stoplight. You're green to go. Yellow, be cautious, go faster. Red, stop.
Justin, if you want to go over a little bit, it's good. I'm good with that. Okay, I want to tell you thank you. First of all, I want to thank everyone that made this possible. I want to welcome everyone here, and I'm very blessed to have my family here tonight. I have 3 of my 5 children present, both of the women I've ever married present, many friends, many supporters, and of course, a wonderful opponent here. I'm going to do my very best to articulate what may be the difference between Justin and myself. I'm a business guy. You're going to be reminded of that probably over and over again, and I take what I consider a business approach. I think our government would be better if we would have taken more of a business approach to government instead of more of a political approach. There'll be very many opportunities for me to say that. I want you to consider 2 things. Number 1, do you think I represent your thoughts, your values, your beliefs? But number 2, I want you to consider if you think that I'm the guy that can build the organization, raise the money, and defeat Colin Allred. Those are 2 separate and distinct things that you have to consider tonight. I'd like for you to walk out of here tonight, and I'd like to have your support. I need your vote not only on the 24th of May, but I need your vote in November. Together, all of us, pulling our power and our strength together, we can get some people to cross over to the other side, and we can make District 32 red once again with your help. Thank you very much.
Good idea. Yeah.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Justin Webb. privileged to be here in front of you. Thank you so much for being here. I'm a 7th-generation Texan, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over my head. Spent 20 years in the military, and besides being just a military man, I also spent the last nearly decade working in business. I have a master's degree in finance. I'm an investment banker. I also have the business experience as well, coupled with international experience from serving in the military, fighting 2 wars and multiple deployments to the Middle East. I think for the first time in a long time, you have a choice between 2 great candidates up here. I would be honored to support Swad, but I happen to think that I'm the better person to run for it because of my extensive experience dealing with the United States government and all of the bureaucracy that comes along with it. Like I said, the runoff is May 24th. I hope to earn your vote. If any of you have any questions, I'm an absolute straight shooter. I will tell you exactly what I think in a very short, concise manner. That's all I have. Thank you for being here. Justin Webb, vote for me on May 24th.
All right, now that we know who y'all are, let's dive right in. So, Mr. Swad, the White House Correspondents' Dinner was last Saturday, and comedian Trevor Noah was right when he looked at President Biden and said, since you've been president, everything's been going up. Gas is up, rent is up, food is up. As a member of Congress, what would you vote to slash, and what would you keep in the government budget to reduce government spending? You have 90 seconds.
Thank you. First thing I want to say is I'm not a 7th-generation Texas. I actually had to make one hell of an effort to get here, and I did. I uprooted myself 4 decades ago and came to Texas, and it was the best decision of my life. I've taken a hard look at the budget, and we've got the record budget this year submitted, $6.8 trillion budget. Problem with that is we're only going to collect about $4 trillion, $4.1 trillion. So what does that mean? There's a huge deficit, the largest deficit of any other year. What would I slash? The number one item on the budget, if you list it in categories, and they do funny things, they rename stuff. The government's famous for that. Remember the name of the voter integrity bill? That's what I mean. They rename stuff that's not true. It's called income security. Is the top line. $1.6 trillion is the top line of the budget, income security. They just rename it free stuff. Free stuff. A lot of stuff is built into there that I would slash. A lot of entitlement programs, and that's another thing that should be misnamed. It should be called free stuff. The 5th largest item on our budget is the interest on the national debt. $305 billion a year interest. That should scare the hell out of all of us, because in 25 years, the interest on the debt alone is going to be $1 trillion, a full 25% of all the money we collect.
Thank you. If either of you need to repeat the question, just at that point in time, let me know.
Got it. Thank you. So the problem with the government, and really every problem we have here in America, can all be traced to the size of the government. What we need to cut is the government across the board. The government needs to learn to work within a budget, just like every single one of us has to do. We can't keep spending, saddling future generations with billions and trillions of dollars of debt. The vast majority of the government spending is not even discretionary. It's something we can't cut because it's already been passed, and it was already paid for, or supposedly paid for in the past. We've got to massively cut spending across every single sector of the federal government. Something like 47% of the United States workers are all employed in some shape or fashion by the federal government. That's entirely too many. The government should be something you do as an act of service, not a lifelong bill that you live on. We've got to cut entitlements. We've got to cut spending across the board. We've spent way too much, even on the military. And I spent 20 years in the military, and I can say that. When I was in Afghanistan, they were shipping in king crab and steaks for us once a month. That's absolutely ridiculous. We're in a combat zone. The government is wasteful in everything they do. They need to learn to live in a budget just like the rest of us do. So the answer is cut it across the board and pass a balanced budget amendment.
Yes.
I'd like for each of you to take another 30 seconds and respond to what you would keep. You've talked about what you would cut. I think it's important to also understand what you would keep in the government budget. I'll give you each 30 seconds. Mr. Swad, you may go first.
Well, I do want to make a comment, and I don't think that because you have experience in dealing with government bureaucracy necessarily makes you a better congressman. I think the whole idea is to change government and eliminate a lot of that bureaucracy. And the way we're going to change government is when we send different kind of people to Washington to represent us. We don't send people to Washington that are used to working within the system. We need people to go to Washington that are disruptors. In the same way Donald Trump was a disruptor, and we had one of the most successful presidencies of our time.
Thank you. Mr. Webb, what would you keep? Respond to Mr. Swad.
So yeah, I'll actually answer the question. I would keep the National Park Services. It's one of the few things the government's ever done that has actually succeeded. We need to keep funding to some of our allies overseas that would absolutely not be able to function without us. I hate to spend taxpayer dollar money on other countries, but countries like Jordan are our only allies in the Middle East, and we need them to continue to support us so that they don't cave and become havens for people like ISIS, just like we saw happen in Iraq and Syria when we left.
Thank you. I'll give you 15 seconds.
Okay. The problem is we gave $400 billion in foreign aid, mostly to countries that hate us. We were giving foreign aid to Pakistan when they were hiding Osama bin Laden 1 mile from a military base. We need to stop that.
Mr. Webb, the second question goes to you. Chuck Schumer said last week also that inflation is up due to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And in order to stem inflation, Congress must raise taxes and repeal the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. What do you believe is the proper form of taxation that should be implemented across this nation? You have 90 seconds.
So the problem with increasing taxes to try to pull you out of a recession, which is what we're entering now, is what Winston Churchill said. It's like standing in a bucket and trying to pick yourself up by the handle. You cannot increase the economy, you cannot reduce inflation by increasing taxation whatsoever. The problem with inflation is the government is already spending too much. They don't need more money, they need to spend less across the board. Stop taking my money and spending it on whatever the heck you want. It's our money and we need to keep it.
Yeah. Would you like to respond? You still have plenty of time about the type of taxation.
Oh yes, type of taxation. I believe in a flat tax. I would like it as low as humanly possible. The gradated tax system we have now is a burden on the people that have made something in their lives, like my opponent here. He's done very well for himself. I don't think he should be punished for that. And I don't think we should be taking his money for an empire that he's built and giving it to people who are not doing anything for a living. So, flat tax as low as we can possibly manage.
Thank you.
The question was about inflation. I learned this in 6th grade.
And taxes.
I'm sorry?
The question is about taxes. What is the proper form of taxation that should be implemented across the nation?
I'll come around to that. Inflation is a result of pumping too much money into the economy. They've turned on the printing presses in the last 24 months, and they've pumped $2 to $2.5 trillion into the economy. Too many dollars chasing too few goods. We learned that in government class when we first go to school. Inflation is also caused, not only by having too many dollars, the cost of energy. In 2020, the average cost of a barrel of oil was $40. It's $103.85 today. Energy is involved in everything we have, everything we make. There's 3 components to a business. There's the cost of goods, and whatever we're talking pizzas or tennis rackets, it doesn't matter. There's the labor component, and then there's the occupancy cost. It's a fundamental fact of business. The occupancy cost has gone up because property taxes have gone up, because inflation has raised the value of property, and that comes out of somebody's pocket. The energy cost has influenced the price of everything, and the labor market has never been higher because labor's harder to get because we've got people addicted to what? Free stuff, more free stuff. That's the core problem. But overall, if there's an overarching problem, it's too much money pumped into the economy at the most inappropriate moment, inappropriate time.
Thank you. Mr. Webb, anything you want to add to that?
No, that's something I said in our first debate as well, that just like you said, it's too much money chasing too few goods. Too much money because the government pumped stimulus checks into the economy, too few goods because we shut down the U.S. economy during COVID, could not get goods in, and the state of California would not open their ports again to let the goods back in. This is a government problem, as every problem we have in this country is. Stop printing money, let the goods in the border, and let the goods into the ports. Ship them around to Texas, ship them into Florida. Just get them out of California.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that's right.
I'd like to ask Mr. Swad to just please revisit the question. What do you believe, you have 30 seconds, what do you believe is the proper form of taxation that should be implemented across the nation?
As you know, we have a graduated tax system. The more you make, the higher percentage you pay. I've paid a hell of a lot of income tax in my life, somewhere nearly $15 million in federal income tax. I've paid my share, and that gives me a right to bitch about the government anytime I want to bitch about the government. A graduated tax, as distasteful as it may seem to some people, works. Because the other way, an across the board or a value-added tax like they have in Europe, punishes the people that can afford to be punished the least.
Thank you. Thank you. All right, gentlemen, we'll move on to our next question. Mr. Swad. Title 42 is about to come to an end at the end of May. And on March 3rd, I was at the McAllen border meeting with the sector chief, who told me that last year, just in the McAllen sector, there were over 500,000 apprehensions in 2021. And he said that this year, just at the McAllen sector, they're on target to have over 800,000 apprehensions. Knowing this, what is your immigration reform plan? Please go into specific detail on what you think must happen. You have 90 seconds.
It's really funny, people talk about the border's out of control. With the border's out of control. Wrong. The border is in very tight control. It's never been more controlled. The problem is it's being controlled by the worst people on earth. The Mexican drug cartels have found a new business in human trafficking, and it goes on every day. We're enriching them to the tune of about $10 million per day. They'll use that money to buy weapons. They'll use that money in some form or fashion that will harm the safety of your children and my children. My border policy is pretty simple. First of all, I would continue to build the wall. I would use the military, if necessary, to secure the border so nobody comes through unvetted. Nobody. We're the only industrialized country in the world that doesn't have a point system for immigration. We let anyone in. Anyone can get a visa. In other countries, you have to qualify. You get a point. If you're well educated, you get more points. If you're a criminal, you get points taken away. It's unbelievable to me that the greatest nation in the world, the shining house on the hill, has a policy that allows anyone in, regardless of their past, and especially now, people come across the border completely unvetted. You know the story. You've seen how many people have been apprehended on the terrorist watch list. You've seen people coming over with fentanyl, the #1 killer of our young people. You see it. It's unbelievable. If I told you that this was happening, you'd think it was a poorly written movie, but unfortunately, it's our United States right now.
Thank you.
So I agree on a couple of those points and vehemently disagree on a few others. The cartels do absolutely control the border, but the difference is we're not letting just anyone in. I have 17 people whose 3 fathers worked for the United States military for 20 years. We smuggled them out of Afghanistan, and we have been fighting with the State Department for 8 months now, trying to get them in the States and get them work permits. They don't let anybody in. They're letting specific people in. And you have to think, with the border this open, they're letting a very specific type of person in. It's who they think is going to vote Democratic in the next 15, 20 years from now.
Now we're going to be more secure because we're going to have somebody in charge of telling us what we can say or what we can publish. I want to relate a quick story, and I hope the card lady doesn't get me for this, but I had a conversation with my daughter, and she's an incredibly bright and wonderful young lady. And the conversation was a few months ago, and it went something like this. I was complaining about how social media platforms can, at their will, shut down certain people if they don't like what you're posting or like what they're saying. I've already been taken off of Facebook a time or two already. And her response to me was, "Hey, did you read your terms and conditions?" I'm sure it was in the terms and conditions. This is a problem. This is a problem when people believe that the terms and conditions, and I'm not picking on my daughter, she's a product of the school system and a product of the social media misinformation that gets passed around at the speed of light. But when the First Amendment of our Constitution is brought down to the same level as the terms and conditions on Facebook or Twitter, we've got a problem with our kids. That's right.
All right, I'd like for each of you to just briefly respond, because what is Congress's role? I'll give each of you 30 seconds to actually protect. What would you do as a member of Congress to protect freedom of speech? I'll give each of you 30 seconds. You may begin.
Well, first of all, has anybody gotten the Constitution out lately and read it? I mean, the Constitution was a wonderful document that was written, I know it was written a long time ago, but it's a guideline of principle. It's not specific policies, it's a guideline of principles. And one of the number one on the list is freedom of speech and assembly. I mean, we get the government that we accept, okay? And we've accepted all the wrong people, and we're sending the wrong people, and we've got the government that we deserve.
Specifically, what would you do as a congressman?
Yeah, I got it.
30 seconds.
So one of the few things that you actually can accomplish in the federal government as a congressman is how you control the purse strings. So the way you do this and the way you help protect it is defund that portion of the Department of Homeland Security so they cannot even employ the people that want to do this. Exactly. Very simple. Take the money out.
Okay, Mr. Swad, you'll begin. We're going to talk more about money.
Good.
As of February 1st, the United States national debt has topped $30 trillion. It's an ominous fiscal milestone for our nation. We have experienced out-of-control spending by both Republicans and Democrats. The New York Times reports, quote, "The borrowing binge has left the nation with a debt burden so large that the government would need to spend an amount larger than America's entire annual economy in order to pay it off." Mr. Swad, who's to blame for our debt crisis? And as a member of Congress, what programs and entitlements would you look to cut or specifically sunset to get our debt back into control?
Okay, we've already talked about this a little bit and talked about the amount of debt we're in, the interest of our debt. I don't want to repeat that, but every few years, I know this, you'll remember this, Congress gets together and they vote, Republicans and Democrats vote together, and they're unified on this, raise the debt ceiling. Last time it was $2.5 trillion. So with the Congress's approval, we were able to go back to China, mostly, and borrow $2.5 trillion to give away more free stuff and misspend the money. There's not one part of government that cannot be improved, trimmed, privatized, or saved money. So the answer, and I know you sometimes think that I maybe don't get right to the answer, it is a congressional vote that allowed them to raise the debt ceiling. I will never, ever in Congress vote for more debt. I built my business from scratch with no debt. It's called bootstrapping. It can be done. The problem is the government doesn't have discipline. Discipline is a component of success. We need to send people to Washington that understands that have discipline, and that understands that you can't borrow your way out of a problem. The debt is scary. It should scare all of you. It should scare your children and your grandchildren, because at the end of the day, all chickens come home to roost. You've heard that before, and it's never going to be more evident than with the debt.
All right, so for who is responsible for this, there are two parties that are solely to blame for this. One is the 435 members of the United States Congress over the last 50 years to be continuing to fund this debt. The other one, this is a hard thing to say, is every one of us sitting in this room. Those of us that have continued to vote for incumbents who raise the debt ceiling and put us farther and farther in debt. The responsibility is on us, the voters, to take out those people, regardless of what party they're in, regardless of how much you like them. If they're increasing our debt and putting our children and our grandchildren farther and farther in debt, a hole they'll never dig themselves out of, that's on us. Yeah. We've got to change it, and it starts with us. Show up to the polls, show up to the primaries, and vote for someone who will do something about it. And if they don't do it, vote them out next cycle. It's our responsibility to do this. It is our government that we voted into office. We can take them out just as easily.
Yes.
All right, next question. Mr. Webb, when it comes to energy trade and energy policy, which do you believe is better for America? Energy independence or energy abundance, which I will define energy independence as America produces and supports ourselves on our natural resources, and energy abundance is an all-of-the-above energy plan with renewables, oil, gas, and having a diverse energy portfolio that trades globally. Which is better for America?
So I'm actually going to give a sort of political answer here. It's a combination of the two. We need to have an energy abundance, and we need to do it with oil and natural gas. Because the more that we sell around the world, the more we starve our enemies like Iran and Russia. They can't export our oil because we can produce oil cheaper and more efficiently than they can. Exactly. If we make our own oil, export it overseas, suddenly suddenly Putin doesn't have the money to run his war. Iran doesn't have the money to fund their terrorist activities against us. We need to be mass producing our oil. We have the energy reserves to do it. But the Biden administration has not renewed any leases and not allowed new permits for fracking in this country. A traditional oil might produce 250 barrels a day. You frack it, it goes up 7 to 10 times, 2,000 barrels a day that we can be making here. And the only thing standing in the way is, once again, the federal government. Yeah. Get the government out of the way, let companies do what they're best at, make products cheaply and efficiently, export it to the rest of the world, and have the rest of the world beholden to us for their energy reserves, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a great answer, and of course, everybody's going to want to say we want to be energy dependent on ourselves and not dependent on anybody else. One of the things I'd like to point out, and this is the manager in me coming out, because I am a manager and I look at the situation, we waste a lot of the energy. Almost 40% of the energy we generate doesn't get to the final end user because it's lost in transmission. We have transmission lines that run for miles. If we were to take another look at this, we could generate energy on smaller microgrids fueled by natural gas. In the United States, it's just sitting on a ton of natural gas. And we could look at energy efficiency. We could lead the world in that. Imagine being at the grill and you're making 5 really beautiful hamburgers. And you're getting ready to walk over to the table and serve your 5 hamburgers, and 2 of them fall off the plate onto the ground. So you get to the table, you only have 3 hamburgers left. That's pretty much what it's like when we use our natural resources to generate electricity, coal-fired or natural gas-fired plants. We get to the table, we're missing 2 hamburgers. We don't have to. The technology exists. It's just a different way of thinking.
All right, we've got 2 more questions on domestic policy. We'll begin with Mr. Swad. Texas has the largest number of uninsured citizens when it comes to health care, and our state is constantly under siege to expand Medicaid, which your opponent is very much in favor of. What are your healthcare solutions that would increase access while decreasing costs and not expanding Medicaid? Mr. Swad, you have 90 seconds.
I'd like to go ahead and talk, first of all, about why healthcare costs what it costs. I'm going to give you a couple of reasons. I've looked into this a little bit. Number one, in order to get more people to qualify for the Obama plan, and you remember back then, they lowered the standards and put more people on Medicare and more people on Medicaid. Medicare reimburses the doctors 50% of the value, Medicaid 40% of the value. So who do you think makes up the difference? The paying customer. If you buy your insurance, and I've insured many people, and as a business owner, I provided health insurance to my employees and provided a savings account for them to pay the deductible. So the first thing is, that's a problem. We did it to ourselves by adding more people that get more free stuff. Number two, the unnatural relationship between the insurance companies, the hospitals, and the pharmaceutical companies. There's something going on there. Insurance companies are buying hospitals and hiring doctors and making them employees, and they're taking the free market out of it. The third thing I'm going to mention again is a little futuristic, but it would save billions of dollars. There's a thing called pharmacological genetic testing that can test people. It's a swab in the mouth. It makes the medicine that given to people so much more efficient. We save billions of dollars. Instead of people getting sicker and gone to the hospital, they get well faster. Very few medical practices do it, and very few people have had the test done. But there are other things but she's waving the card.
So I don't know if you've paid attention to what Colin Allred is sending out and posting lately, but he is now touting this new program he has to reduce the price of insulin. Basically put a cap on the price that companies can charge for insulin to make it more affordable for everyone. Sounds like a great idea. The problem is there are only 3 companies in the world that make insulin. The federal government has put so many regulations on top of these medicines that additional people cannot enter the space. There is no generic insulin because the federal government is in the way. They keep extending their patents by making tiny little changes to it year after year, so the patent never expires and no one else can get into it. Once again, the fundamental problem is the federal government's interference in our lives. Get the government out of the way, allow generic marketers to come up and start making the drugs that are so costly. We saw this exact same thing happen with the HIV drug several years back. One person had complete control of it and they could charge whatever they wanted. Well, now we have 3, by the way, only one of which is in the United States. Guess who they're donating to in this primary? Colin Allred. So, once again, get the government out of the way. We need to be consumers of healthcare. If we can open up the system so you can see how many times your doctor has performed a surgery, how many times he's prescribed a certain medicine, and you can give an overall rating of him, maybe even know how many people he's actually killed before. If we had the type of access to information like we have to hotels and restaurants, we could do that with doctors and hospitals, we could democratize the entire healthcare system without any additional government oversight. Give it the power back to the people, and you can choose where to go, who you see, and what medicines you're taking, not having the government interfere and insurance companies doing it for you.
Yes.
All right. Mr. Webb, you'll begin this question. Over the last 2 years, crime has swept the U.S. 2/3 of America's largest cities have seen more homicides in 2021 than in 2020, with killings rising in New York from 468 to 485, in Chicago from 771 to 797, and in Houston from 400 to 467. More than 13 big cities, including Philadelphia, Austin, and Portland, set all-time records for homicides in 2021. Mr. Webb, what do you believe is the cause of this violence, and how should Congress solve violent crime and policing to ensure safe communities around the country? You have 90 seconds.
First off, what do every single one of those cities have in common? Who controls them? Which party? Democratic Party. What have they been saying for 2 years? Defund the police. You get rid of the police, guess what happens? You're free to commit crime. That's a very simple answer. Get rid of the defund the police crap that they're touting across the country. Reinforce our police forces, have them in the neighborhoods, not out on the highways giving people tickets to increase tax revenue to the counties. They need to be back in the community like they were when my dad was a state trooper for 30 years, going up and down in the neighborhoods, the places that they know in their own precincts. We don't see that anymore. I live in North Dallas. I don't see a policeman once, maybe a month. I don't know where they are, what they're doing. The recruiting is heavily down in police stations because of this defund the police rhetoric that we're hearing around the country. Would you want to become a police officer in this? It's an underpaid, underappreciated job. And if you can lose your livelihood for one mistake that you made or even end up in jail, there's something wrong with the system itself. And you ask what Congress can do about that. Unfortunately, that is not under the purview of Congress. It is something the states and the cities themselves have to maintain. I don't want the federal government encroaching on our neighborhoods and telling us how we need to police, and telling the police what they need to be doing. They can't get their own job correct. They certainly don't need to be in my neighborhood.
Yes. There you go.
Well, I certainly agree with that. We don't need the federal government involved at the state or the local level, certainly with policing. But the problem that I see, and the problem, you can't find a better example than this, in Los Angeles. The district attorney installed by George Soros, George Gaston. And we're seeing district attorneys all across the nation in some of our bigger cities being installed, and their purpose of their installation is to go soft on crime. You know it's legal to steal up to $950 worth of goods in California. You can't be arrested for it. How did we get here? How did we get to this point? Last summer, a man broke into my house in the middle of the day. I came home at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. My window was broken. There was a guy sitting at the kitchen table with my 12-gauge shotgun that I kept by the door on the kitchen table, and he gives me one of these looks like, hey, come on in, come on in. I was glad the police weren't defunded because I called him. It turned into a huge ordeal. He left 8 hours later with a tear gas inhalation, $100,000 damage to my house. He was out and back on the street before the tear gas had cleared from my house. It's a turn and burn. It's a turn and burn. We have to address the problem. Keep bad people in jail, make them serve the time. It goes back to whatever happened to punishment. Let's punish bad people. Eventually we'll get less bad people.
All right, at this point, we're going to move on to foreign policy. If you guys want some water, feel free. All right, foreign. As we approach
Ukraine, almost $33 billion. It's ridiculous. We've been helping Ukraine since '93. And I'll say this before it comes up. I will never support declaring war on Russia, something that my opponent has touted. I will never support taking the risk that my son or my daughter is going to go on foreign soil and fight for a country that I don't really give a damn about. I'm more concerned about what's happening on the southern border of my United States than what's going on in Ukraine. It will never happen if I have anything to do with it. And as you know, declaration of war is something that does initiate in Congress of the United States. And it's never going to happen. When the United States sovereignty itself is threatened, like it is right now on our southern border, I'll have a different answer for you. Until then, I'd like to keep most of my tax dollars and 100% of my children here in the United States.
First off, I have never once advocated for going to war with Russia at all. I've said that we need to have a strong foreign policy, a strong military presence. If you walk into this next hallway over here, you'll see a picture of Anne Frank sitting there on the wall. That's because we did nothing in 1939 and then Germany started rolling across Europe. We cannot allow that to happen again. I do not want us getting a direct conflict with Russia under any circumstances. We cannot be sending our people over there. I completely agree. I do not want to start a nuclear war. I don't want World War III to start. However, there are freedom-loving people fighting against oppression and an authoritarian regime who has been an enemy of the United States since 1970. We have to help the Ukrainians to stop the Russians in their tracks where they are before they take Poland and Germany and the UK and before they end up on our own shores. We have to stop them where they are. Once again, we cannot go into war with Russia. It would become a nuclear Armageddon. It is the worst thing we can imagine. We have to do what we can short of actually going to war. We do not send any troops into Ukraine. We need to send funding over there, make sure they have the most modern weapons possible to stop the Russian regime in its tracks. Or we're going to have 1939 happen all over again.
Well, here we go. It must be YouTube. It must be YouTube disinformation because I watched it with my own eyes. Justin, you made a statement that you would declare war on Russia. Stupid thing to do. Stupid thing to say over Ukraine. Please, please. Ukraine's not a member of NATO. They're a member of the European Union, and that's their problem. That's not our problem. They're not even a NATO member. So I don't understand what the rush is to try to defend Ukraine. Now the problem is it's played out on television, and it's hard to look at, and it's hard to watch, and we're decent people, and we feel terrible.
Yep.
But that's really pretty much what it's about.
So in our last debate, Nathan Davis said we don't need to be sending people to war in Russia. And I said, to be clear, we should not go to war with Russia. I do not advocate that for whatsoever. You may have misheard because you didn't show up to the last debate, but the rest of over here know what I said. Once again, once again, we cannot go to war with Russia. Full stop, period.
Good.
I do want to have a follow-up 30 seconds, one more question on this. Not trying to beat a dead horse or hopefully a dead Russian, but I am curious on the money part. I'd like for each of you to respond to, do you think we have sent enough aid? Each of you, I'll give you 30 seconds. Mr. Swad, you respond a little bit, but Mr. Webb, you go first.
So I think we've sent enough monetary aid. One thing we can do is send our old and aging equipment, just like Poland is doing. We don't need to send we don't need to send them stealth fighters, all that kind of stuff. But every single year, Congress pays to decommission thousands of military aircraft, Humvees, armored vehicles. We cannot spend that money, hand it over to Ukraine. We're not wasting money on it. We're helping them out, and we're still stopping Putin.
Thank you.
Well, what we should have done is given them all the stuff we left in Afghanistan. Yeah. You know, that would have been an idea. I think I've made my position pretty clear on aid to Ukraine and certainly sending U.S. troops to Ukraine. So I'm pretty clear on that.
Great. Thank you. All right. Next question will go to Mr. Webb. You start the first one, the second one will go to Mr. Webb. Congress is looking at repealing the 2001 authorized use of military force. Do you think that with these tensions with Russia and Ukraine, that is the right decision? And more importantly, would you vote to keep it or repeal it? You have 90 seconds.
So for those of you that don't know, in 2001, we authorized the use of military force in Afghanistan, renewed it in 2003 for Iraq. That's something that should never have been passed in the first place. If we're going to send troops into combat, myself included in both of those wars, we need to actually have Congress be the one to take charge of that, not the president, not have the discretion of whatever guy is in office at the time. I am 100% for repealing the act, and I hope that we never use something like that ever again. We have not fought an actual war since 1945, which, by the way, is the last time we won a conflict, because Congress wasn't involved, the entire people weren't behind it. If we're going to send troops into harm's way, it needs to be voted on by the 435 members of the U.S. Congress, not whatever political whims are going on at the time. We cannot authorize force without Congress declaring war on somebody. And I hope we never go to war again. But I sure as hell hope we're not sending troops over there with some fickle mission like we did in Iraq and Afghanistan, with no end, no goals, and no objectives. We had thousands of Americans die. My friends died over there because of this kind of crap. We cannot allow that to happen. Remove it, repeal it, and never enact it again.
Thank you.
As you know, that was passed by the Bush administration to go in to look for those weapons of mass destruction, right? And that were never found. Unfortunately, many American lives were lost. 2,488 families had the worst day of their life when that plain white military car came up their driveway because their son or daughter was serving in Iraq. 58,000 families also had that worst day of their life because their son or daughter was serving in Vietnam. And I'm asking you, for what? For what? Justin, you think it was an unjust war, but you kept re-upping, and you went back, and you went back. Why do you go back if you don't think we should be there? It wasn't a draft. You could join us here in free enterprise America, but you kept going back to it. So I don't think you can have it both ways. I don't think you can say, yeah, the American sovereignty was threatened and that's why I went, and then say we wasted the effort and we wasted the billions of dollars. In the case of Afghanistan, $2 trillion. So I wouldn't do it. And I wouldn't vote for it in Congress either. And I don't think Congress should have, there should be a way to circumvent Congress to send troops into harm's way. So we do agree on that. So.
Thank you. 30 seconds to respond.
So the reason I volunteered to go back time and time again is that my country needed me. Regardless of the reasons that we went there, my brothers and sisters were putting their lives on the line. The very least I could do is be there with them. People haven't agreed with wars since Vietnam. People still went there. My uncles served in Vietnam. My grandfather served in Korean War II. There's something fundamental in this country that people sign up and volunteer to risk up into their lives for service to this country. When I first volunteered, it was January of 2001. It was peacetime. I found myself stuck in the middle of Iraq 2 years later. When I joined, I had no idea what was coming. But I served and I continue to serve to this day because I took an oath to support the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Mr. Swad, for the last few years, Americans have heard that climate change is an existential crisis, and many scientists warn that if we don't solve it now, there won't be a planet in 100 years once we've all gone. The Biden administration rejoined the Paris Climate Accord in February 2021, and since we have seen billions of dollars snuck into bills to curb climate change in subsidies and handouts. What government intervention on the climate do you support? You have 90 seconds.
I want you to build the bridge for me between supporting the Constitution of the United States and serving in Afghanistan and giving those people. How many civilian casualties was there? How do you think you went there to support your brothers that were already there? Everybody there should have come home. Everybody should have come home. It's a debate, people.
Hey, calm down.
Hey guys, okay team. Everybody calm down, take a deep breath.
It's an important point.
We're gonna restart the question.
Build me the bridge.
Hey, audience.
Gentlemen,
Please.
if you want to disagree, please go outside.
You can't do right, you're gonna have to go.
Hey, guys, all of you, regardless,
You
please.
have your position. So if you can't do the right thing and obey the rules of engagement here, you're gonna have to leave. Period.
It's okay.
All right,
Who walked over here?
gentlemen, I want to bring the audience back to the front stage. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Thank you for your
The
civility.
question that's being asked,
Have a good day.
that you asked, isn't that the point of this debate?
Yes, that is the exact point. So let me
I will go ahead and quickly build that bridge for you.
All right, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, and then we're going to move on as an audience. Thank you.
It's called service. It is a service to this country. You volunteer up and into your life, you wherever the American flag flies, for whatever reason. It doesn't matter if it's an unjust war, it is your duty to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. Period. Now, when Antonio was selling his first company in 2003, I was not showering for 5 months in the middle of Iraq and getting shot at. We've had very different lives. But the fact that we're standing here on this stage and that we generally agree in most things shows the greatness of the American country. We can come together. We disagree on things, but we have to come together as a party, regardless of what we disagree on. The main goal here is to beat Colin Allred, not fight each other. And when we argue like this, all we're doing is giving the Democrats more ammunition against us.
Let's come back to the climate. All right, let's come back to the climate. Do you want, I will
Getting
repeat
pretty
the whole.
warm in.
I know, doesn't it? Yeah. All right, Mr. Swad, we'll start this over again. For the last few years, Americans have heard that the climate change is an existential crisis, and many scientists warn that if we don't solve it now, there won't be a planet in 100 years. The Biden administration rejoined the Paris Climate Accord in February of 2021, and since we have seen billions of dollars sunk into bills and snuck into bills to curb climate change in subsidies and handouts. What government intervention on climate do you support? You have 90 seconds.
I don't think it's anybody with a brain will deny that the climate is changing and it's a very real problem. It's not something that should be politicized where the Democrats are on one side and the Republicans on the other. It's very real. It's really happening. And the answer, however, isn't to throw money at it and to join the Paris Climate Accord and pay a disproportionate portion because we're rich, because we're the United States. We waste money a variety of ways. With respect to this, the most interesting thing I saw recently, that we're still giving $12,500 taxpayer dollar refunds or rebates to people that buy an electric car. There's a year wait for people that want to buy an electric car. Why are we giving them an incentive to buy something that they want so badly they're willing to wait a year for. And by the way, an electric car actually, if you look at the whole lineage of construction, actually, and there's been studies of this, is a dirtier, more polluting car when you consider that the energy has to be generated and the production of lithium necessary to make the batteries. It's a very filthy process, and it's an illusion that the Biden administration is trying to put on us, that if everybody drove an electric car, we'd be doing our part for the planet. It's an illusion. You want to talk about misinformation? That's a perfect example.
Thank you.
Once again, the government is the problem here. The United States government is the single largest polluter in the world. Under the Obama administration in 2012, they specifically exempted themselves from having to report their own greenhouse emissions. 900 of 1,200 Superfund sites in the United States are all government installations. The government is the problem. Long before they tell me what I can drive or try to tell me what kind of light bulbs I need to use in their house, they need to clean up their own mess that they've created for the past 100 years. There are islands in the Pacific that will be uninhabitable for centuries because of nuclear tests and anthrax testing on these islands. The government is the problem. They've polluted far more than the BP oil spill did. They're the problem. Once again, so what I would support is them cleaning up their own act, cleaning up all their own mess, and then once they've done that, they can come and talk to me about what type of car I drive. Until then, they need to mind their own business.
There you go.
Mr. Webb, this next question goes to you. Which country do you think poses the greatest threat to America and why? Your choices are Russia, China, North Korea, Iran.
So in the near term, it's Russia. For the next 2 years, 3 years, I think it's Russia. Long term is China. The problem with China is we think in election cycles, 2 to 4 years. China thinks in decades to centuries. The plants they're building, the bases they're putting in the Pacific right now, is not something for the Trump administration or the Biden administration. It's something they're looking to project out 30, 40, 50 years in the future. China is our biggest threat. They own most of our debt, and most of our trade comes from China. We have got to find alternative sources of funding and alternative sources of products. We cannot continue funding our mortal enemy in China in any way.
I would agree that China is a tremendous threat, and the problem is we've got ourselves addicted to cheap goods manufactured in China, our medicines manufactured in China. They're the largest global human rights violators on the planet. However, the question was about threat, and Iran was on the list. I had a conversation with the director of the Jewish conservatives in Washington, D.C., and he enlightened me on something that was very scary. He sent me a white paper that showed me how the United States is selling enriched uranium to Russia. I know we all hate Russia now, but we're still doing business with them. Russia's in turn moving that uranium to Iran, so they become a nuclear capable nation. And it's because we, the United States, are supplying the uranium in the first place. So there's a lot of things going on right now, and as you know, Iran is the sworn enemy of Israel, and the thing that they would like more than anything is to wipe Israel off the map. And we're a party to it. If we supply them with the goods necessary, I think the danger exists. So I think both the answers are right, and everybody on your list is horrible. But I think the most direct threat would be Iran. The long-term threat, as you know, would be China. And if it was me, I would look at that debt and consider defaulting on the debt that we owe China and justify it because of the damage that they did to our nation with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Well, let's actually dig into that a little bit. So, let's talk about China specifically. What is your proposal to keep China in check on the economy, on their military, trade, cyber espionage, and COVID? It's a long list. You can choose what you think you'd like to discuss most, but how are you going to keep China in check? We'll begin with you, Mr. Swad.
One of the saddest sights in my life was I was in China a few years back on a tour of manufacturing and stuff, and I'm leaving the hotel and we're going out to the plants, and I see all these familiar logos: John Deere, Rainbird Sprinkler, Ford, all of these great American iconic companies that have been allowed to move their plants to China. How did that happen? All of our tooling, all of our manufacturing now resides in China. When we needed ventilators a few months ago, where'd they have to come from? We had to have them built in China for the most part. So I think the first step with China is to try to move our manufacturing back here. The United States is the greatest nation on earth, but it needs to be the most independent nation on earth and lead the rest of the globe from a position of strength, not a position of dependency. And that's the position we've put ourselves in with China. Poor leadership at the top is responsible. The people we send to be party to our government time and time again, and we allow them to stay there like a president that's been in government for 5 decades. Ridiculous. So the problem is people we send to government, how the government allows these things to happen, and it has to stop.
Thank you. Mr. Webb, what's your proposal to keep China in check?
So actually 2 parts. I'll tackle the manufacturing one first. We can actually solve two birds with one stone, kill 2 birds with one stone here. If we bring what they call nearshore manufacturing, so if companies like Ford or John Deere say, it's too expensive to manufacture in the United States. Okay, well, if that's true and you decide that you want to do that, let's put them in Mexico. Nearshore here, we can incentivize jobs in Mexico. People won't be streaming across the border, they'll have their own opportunities in Mexico. We can help solve the border crisis as well, keeping goods cheap and getting them out of China. There's a couple of great companies that are supplying our ports down in Houston now that their goal is to take all of the oil manufacturing out of China and bring it near shore. That's one opportunity. The other one is militarily. So once again, don't want us in a direct conflict with China. They also have nuclear weapons and a lot more people than we do. Nothing scares the Chinese more than the Japanese. My wife's actually a quarter Japanese. Her grandfather brought her grandmother back from Okinawa after the war. I spent a lot of time in Japan. The Chinese are absolutely terrified of them. So if you want to keep China in check, just let the Japanese military start doing exercises closer to China. It scares the crap out of them. We don't have to get involved.
There you go.
Everybody wins.
That's a very bold statement. Awesome.
All right. Who answered the first? I think Mr. Webb. All right. Israel has proven to be America's greatest ally. Do you believe that Congress should support Israel in a one-state or two-state solution? And why?
So we asked this in the first debate, and I said, honestly, I don't have an answer, and if I did, I'd be accepting a Nobel Prize for it right now, rather than talking to all of you. It's a very complex issue. I would prefer to see a one-state Israel. The problem is, if you have a single state, you've basically just opened up the border to Palestine, where all of their avowed enemies are living and currently waging war against the Israelis. I don't have a good solution to that. I would love to see one state solution and a very strong Israel, which is our ally. But I don't see how they can do it without opening up their own borders and subjecting their own citizens to terrorists from within.
So you don't believe in either solution? Just out of...
I would love to see a one state solution. That would be my preference.
Okay.
But
Thank
I
you.
don't know how we do it.
Mr. Swad?
It's a very, very complicated question, and this is one of those examples where you need time to maybe fully develop the answer. As you know, the Abraham Accord signed back 2020 under President Trump was one of the biggest steps towards bringing peace to the Middle East. We've got several countries on board and several more we're planning to join. At the first forum, I made this statement that I read a book by Jimmy Carter, and that got turned into, I love Jimmy Carter, okay? That's completely ridiculous. The person that said that and believes that is as guilty as the news media that they condemn right now. Let's keep the facts the facts. I'm reading a book because I'm interested in the Middle East and I want to learn everything I can from every perspective. The answer, in my opinion, is a two-state solution, where Palestine has their own country and responsible for their own people, and Israel has their own country and takes responsibility for their people as well. You're never going to have peace in the Middle East as long as the conflict that's centuries old and generations old is continued to allow to exist. The Palestinians need a country that they can call their own, and then they need to be held accountable for their actions.
Thank you. Gentlemen, we have 2 questions left and then closing statements. All right. Time flies, right?
You're having fun?
You want to turn the heat back up? All right, let's do it. If elected, Mr. Swad, would you vote to make Kevin McCarthy the Speaker of the House, knowing what he said about Donald Trump behind closed doors regarding January 6th? Would you vote for him, and why or why not? You have 90 seconds.
And that's a great loaded question, and I knew you'd get around to that. I will say this about Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy has done a wonderful job trying to unify the Republican Party. And the Republican Party needs some unification right now. We have a schism in our party between, as you know, the Trumps and the non-Trumps. And until we can heal that wound, we're going to get our ass beat every time by the Democrats. And so that needs to be considered. Now, would I vote for Kevin McCarthy? First of all, I don't know who else is running. And I would consider anybody and give them the consideration of talking to him. I do think Kevin McCarthy has done a wonderful job in trying to unify the party. I saw him deliver an amazing fire and brimstone speech about how much damage has been done to the United States in the first 12 months of the Biden administration. So he does have that right. And he controls a lot of money with his political PAC. But as for the question, answer your question directly, how do I know? I need to know what my choices are. And right now, there is no choice.
In a quick answer, no, I would not vote for him. Just like Antonio said, though, I would like to see who else is running. But my reasons for voting against him are multifaceted, one of which, he's been there too long. We need term limits in Congress, first and foremost. Yeah. If we don't have people, if we had term limits in Congress, we wouldn't be dealing with Nancy Pelosi right now.
Yes.
So, he's been there too long. I would vote for someone else to move the line along, get more people with experience in the House, and again, vote for term limits. Again, I would need to see who else is running. There are people a lot worse than him, some better, but it would really depend on who's running. But if there was anybody even remotely qualified, I would vote for them over Kevin McCarthy.
All right. Very interesting, gentlemen. Very interesting. All right.
So, I'll tell him that to his face as well.
Okay. Last question before closing statements. Mr. Webb, voter turnout for Colin Allred was about 31,000 people. And we have the exact numbers.
31,247 running unopposed.
And
the 6 Republicans combined had 22,121, a 40% difference.
All right. I needed that audience participation.
Dallas County because of
all right, I needed audience participation on those numbers. Thank you. So, voter turnout was low for Republicans. Colin Allred ran unopposed. What makes you the best candidate to defeat Colin Allred and inspire Republicans to come out and vote? 90 seconds.
What makes me the best candidate to go against him and get voter turnout is, A, the military. Over 85% of people of either party support veterans in U.S. Congress. We have the lowest number of veterans in Congress we've had since the 1970s now. So that alone helps bridge the gap. The other thing is actually going out into the community and meeting these people where they are. You can't sit in your house and send out door knockers. You have to go out, meet people, talk to them one-on-one, get to know them, and find out what their issues are and what's bothering them. Me as a white guy, I'm not going to go into East Dallas and tell people out there what they should think and who they should vote for. I want to ask them what their issues are, what's important to them. They've had enough of white people telling them what to do. We need to get their opinions and learn what's important to them. The Hispanic community is heavily turning against the Democratic Party now. Over 40% of them have a disapproval rating on Joe Biden, simply because of his policies of the open border and the detriment he's done to this country. We've got to get out there and meet them. The reason I'm the best candidate, I'm a fighter, come from a long line of fighters, and we need somebody to take the fight to Colin Allred and to the U.S. Congress. That's my answer.
Thank you. No, just
The question was how to beat Colin Allred.
what makes you the better candidate to defeat Colin Allred?
Definitely. First of all,
Turnout.
First of all, let's look at the math. In order to beat Colin Allred, we're going to need some people that voted for him before to vote for our side this time. It's math. There's 780,000 people in District 32. The majority of them are Democrats. As you know, and if you looked at the map, and we have it out there, it was a heavily brokered backroom deal to ensure that District 32 would remain a Democrat district, and the trade-off was to give the Park Cities and the other wealthier, whiter part of the district to Beth Van Dyne to ensure that that would stay Republican. These are the kind of backroom deals that we want to get away from. I will beat Colin Allred because I'll get some of the people that voted for him to vote for me and give me a shot. The other thing is I will engage 30% of the district is Hispanic. I will engage the Hispanics like never before. I have a 32-year history of serving the Hispanic market. I'm not afraid to go to those neighborhoods. 35 years ago, I walked those neighborhoods. Putting door hangers on those very same houses, asking them to come that evening and buy a pizza from me. I know the community very, very well, and that's part of the key to winning. That's not the only key, but that's a huge part of it when the constituency in the district is 30% Hispanic.
Yeah, right.
Gentlemen, congratulations. You went through the fire dome. We're done with all of the questions. Ladies and gentlemen, please give these candidates a hand. We're going to move on with closing statements. Mr. Webb will begin. You each have 2 minutes to state your case, why you, and thank you for a great debate, gentlemen.
Thank you. Once again, thank you everyone for being here. Appreciate it so much. If we had more people like you, then we wouldn't have the type of turnout we've had recently. We've got to get more people to the polls, and that really involves a lot of you going out and talking to your communities, getting in front of your friends, hosting events for people like me and Antonio at your house. Come out, let us speak, get to know us. Learn that we're conservative and not crazy. That's the problem now is everyone thinks that conservatives have gone completely off the rails. They have to get out there and meet us and realize that we're normal people.
Good, yes.
Like I said, longtime Texan, 7 generations. Mother come from a single mother. My father was a police officer. I am the district. I worked to put myself through college. I had to fight 2 wars to get my degrees. And if you actually look at the military, over 23% of the military are Hispanic. They outnumber the number of Anglos by almost 4x from the total population. They understand it. They understand the service. They've worked hard for everything they have, and we have to acknowledge that and meet them where they are. The reason you should vote for me is, like I said, I'm a fighter. I come from a long line of fighters. Davy Crockett was my great uncle. I've had somebody from my family fight in every single war the United States has ever fought, all the way back to the Revolution. And I took these 2. So we either can't get in another war for 20 years, or I've got to hurry up and have some kids. Wife's gonna be an evil eye there. But like I said, I'm a fighter. I will take the fight to Colin Allred. I'll take the fight to Washington, D.C. I can't be bought. I'm just a mean guy. Like, you can't bribe me. You can't push me off on the side. One of my drill instructors in boot camp, and he told me, he's like, Webb, you're a piece of crap when you got here, you're a piece of crap here, and you're a league piece of crap. How the hell do you come to Marine Corps boot camp and not change? I said, sir, that was my intention. I said, very well, and he walked off. DC ain't gonna change me. I am who I am regardless. You can tell by my very blunt style of speaking. I speak straight from the heart and tell you like it is with no BS involved. That's what you want in a congressman. Somebody who's gonna tell you like it is and tell you when things are wrong and do what it takes to get it done.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Justin. I'd like to point out that your life is a variety and a collection of the experiences that you've had, what you've done, what kind of tools you've put in your toolbox that you might be of use in Congress. For every day that Justin's been on Earth, I've been on Earth 1.5 days. I put a lot of tools in my toolbox. I'm a skilled negotiator. I've employed thousands of people. I know what responsibility feels like to be sure that that check is good when that person goes to the bank and cashes it. All of the things that I've learned in my life and 4 decades in business are going to come to play in Washington. I cannot be bought. I don't want the job because of the prestige or because I see it as a country club kind of position. That's not who I am. I believe in the Constitution of the United States. I'm going to do everything I can to get back to that and encourage others. There's a difference between convincing somebody and persuading them. Convincing them is like rubbing oil on your skin. Persuading them, it goes inside and you plant an idea in their head and you grow it in their head. I can persuade others when we get there to do the right thing, adhere to the Constitution of the United States. I too know what it's like to defend the Constitution because I read it and I believe it. You want to send somebody to Congress that's a disruptor. Somebody that's not going to fit in that pretty little box on the shelf like all the other people there. Somebody that the lobbyists jump on as soon as you get there. It won't matter to me. I'm there to serve the people. I'm there because I want the job and I want to be hired by the people of District 32. If you don't like it, in 2 years, cut me loose.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please give these guys a big round of applause. Also, thank you to the Dallas County Republican Party for hosting this event. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you to all of you. Good night and good luck. Let's all give Genevieve a huge round of applause for doing such a fantastic job. Thank you so much. I want to thank both of these candidates. It's not easy to be a candidate. It's very difficult. They're both wonderful guys. We're lucky if we get either one of them, and they both are far superior to Colin Allred.
That's right.
So we're very excited. Thank you guys for your hard work. Thanks for all the time you put in. It's important. Thank you.